I'm recording. We're on air. Good morning. Good afternoon. Some folks perhaps are from Europe. A good part of the day, I should say. Thank you all for joining and welcome to the Large Scale Scrum meetup of New York City. It's Sunday. Oh, sorry, Saturday. Saturday. We usually do it on Sunday, May 22nd. Today we have a special guest. Ron Whitebread, who was recommended to me as a great entertaining speaker by my good friend and colleague, Dhaval Panchal, a coach and an enterprise coach and trainer. Ron, I would like to give a quick intro of Ron's modest persona, which frankly isn't so modest, right? Given the track record he's got. So he comes with a lot of experience from the automotive, energy, and technology space, as well as supply chain sectors, where he has driven with passion, to seek better ways of delivering solutions and managing work. Ron is also one of the co-founders of the Agile Leadership Network of Houston, where he's from. He's from Houston. He also launched the Lone Star Agile Coaches Camp back in 2019, and at the moment, currently, he's the Scrum Master with Cisco Cybersecurity Team. So Ron has, especially in the field of cybersecurity, he's got a lot of experience. According to the Gallup Strengths Finder assessment, Ron's top themes are input, connectedness, intellectual, maximizer, and learner. So he comes with a very wide gamut, wide array of expertise and knowledge. So that's really the edge, the angle of Ron. And today's presentation has a very interesting, very anchoring title: Darwin and the Theory of Agile Coaching Evolution. And those of you that are familiar with the Charles Darwin's theory of evolution would probably find it interesting. I'm looking forward to it myself, as I studied it at school a lot. So without any further ado, Ron, you have control, and I'm going to give the floor to you. Folks, my kind ask to, if you have any specific questions, please put them in the chat, but make it very succinct and to the point. Maybe proceed with a question column and ask a question.
Probably not a good place to walk across the street.
And keep yourself, Karen and everyone else, keep yourself on mute unless you're explicitly asking questions. And Ron will finish whenever he finishes, and he will start taking those questions as well. Okay. And by the way, there's a link in the chat which should be working, where after the call, after the session, we will be uploading the video and Ron's assets, Ron's deck, or any other materials he may have. Okay. Off to you, Ron. You can,
all right.
Pick this up. Yep. Can you?
Apologies in advance here. Just as we were about to get started here, the landscapers showed up here, so I will try to talk over them for the first 10 minutes here until they are finished. But yeah, welcome everybody. And thank you for the introduction there, Gene. Take you on a little journey here in terms of what I experienced and what our company experienced here on our Agile journey. So I'm hoping or expecting that probably most of you are at least somewhat familiar with Charles Darwin and the controversy that he caused when he introduced the theory of evolution. Basically that new species were not created as much as they evolved from existing species, either due to unique ecosystems and environments they lived in, or changes that took place within those. And so that eventually became known as the survival of the fittest, as a way to kind of simplify it and remember it. But a book that I picked up about 20 years ago called The Beak of the Finch actually followed some recent research that was done on the Galapagos Islands in the past 40 years. And they focused primarily on the finches, the bird species that were on those islands that were unique to anywhere else in the world. And what they discovered was that a lot of evolution was expected that it took a long time to happen. But what they found out is that it didn't take hundreds of years or even generations for some changes to take place. They observed changes taking place year over year due to changes in the environments. So that was something that Darwin didn't get the benefit of realizing how quickly these changes could take place. And there's a documentary here. We'll try to get that link up there on the chat that talks about the book and what they've uncovered in the last 15 minutes. It does a nice job of summarizing that. So this kind of got me to thinking here. I'm wondering if a similar thought could be applied to Agile coaching, both Agile coaches themselves or organizations that are doing Agile coaching. I mean, is there only one way to do Agile coaching, or can it evolve as well? So we'll take a look at one company's journey and my own journey on how it appears that coaching does evolve. So we're going to start off with the first of three unique ecosystems that existed over time. This is where we kind of started off with here. Back in 2016, the company was basically operating with probably what a lot of companies have been doing for a long time, and that's doing projects, waterfall type projects. They're using temporary resources that are borrowed from other teams. And these teams are basically siloed teams that operate supporting a function or a system. And so by doing so, you're creating a lot of dependencies, a lot of queues as work gets handed off from one group to another. That results in long lead times in order to deliver anything. And unfortunately, business only really got involved at the beginning and at the end. They would hand off their list, their wish list of requirements, and then IT would take and develop that into their own documentation, from which they would build, test, and then they would hand it back to the business saying, here's what you ordered, and maybe it is and maybe it isn't. So this is kind of the environment that we were starting off with here. And so this is kind of like, I've been playing Agile door-to-door salesman at this company. I've been with them for 15 years. And about after the first year is when I first became aware of Agile. And I had been trying to sell it to the organization, either at the management level or at the grassroots level. And I finally got a connection with a change that we had in IT leadership in doing an experiment. And so what they did was we decided to start up a couple teams, which we call Pathfinder Teams. And I was chosen to be the Scrum Master on the first Agile team. And it truly was a new team. It was a cross-functional team that had not existed before. And their goal was to be able to quickly stand up environments for software teams to be able to start developing very quickly, rather than the conventional way that we were doing it. So I kind of view this as my emergence of Gandalf the Apprentice at this stage here. And what did these Pathfinder teams look like? What did this era look like? Well, we were trying something new, obviously. We had new roles, new ways of operating using Scrum without having specialist titles. You just had the product owner, the Scrum Master, and the team. And so this was something that was very different. These didn't exist before at this company. We also had been given implicit permission to bend the rules as we needed, do what we needed to do to get things done, and don't worry so much about following the rules as just finding a way to get it done. And then we had a team or a company that was on site, and they were doing software development for us for a project, a large one. And so they also did coaching as well. So we engaged them, and they brought some people in to pair with our team to represent each of the different roles. So you had someone for the product owner, one for the scrum master, someone representing the analysis role, the development role, the testing role. So you had a large group of external coaches that were pairing with the teams themselves so that we could learn from them. And then that could be transitioned over to us as we started doing that ourselves with their support and their observation. And then probably the coolest thing is that we were allowed to do experimentation. This was something very new for us. And one of the things that our particular team did that I thought was really cool is we actually dedicated every other Friday to do a one-day sprint, if you will, experimentation. Each person on the team would say, I'm going to learn about this, or I'm going to do a proof of concept of this. They would do a one-day sprint. And at the end of the day, they would present what it was that they had learned or what they had created. And a lot of this helped build ideas to go onto the backlog of what we took forward from there. So again, something very unique that we had never done before. On the positive side, the outcome from this here, we had dedicated teams now that were delivering prioritized value and very quickly. We were given time to learn new things and experiment with things, experiment with new tools. We were starting to do new work in the cloud that we hadn't before, using SaaS software as a service products that we had never used before, and trying new things that we had never tried before. And because of we were able to circumvent or bend some of the rules, we were able to identify and spot where there were bottlenecks in the current processes in order for us to be able to do the work that we needed to do. That also led to realization that this model, while effective for a small couple of teams, was not really a cost-effective way or a sustainable way of spreading this across the organization, scaling it across all of IT. And we also noticed that we had to create a number of workarounds in the processes. And if you're trying to make enemies with your PMO or your VMO or purchasing or HR, this is a good way to do it when you're ignoring the rules or going around the rules at times that they had put in place. And we also learned that it takes time to learn Agile and really be able to deliver consistently. This is not something that you can do very quickly and run with it. It really takes time to be able to become proficient at this. So if we look at this kind of from a 2020 hindsight, even though we're in 2021 now, again, we learned that external coaches is not really in a cost-effective way to scale this unless you've also brought in an internal coaching capability, which we did not have. The experiment showed that we can do Agile, but we can't scale it in the same way that we started off. And that another thing that we came across was we didn't really have a clear definition of when we were done. And by that, I mean, when could this team be self-sustaining on its own? And as we were working with this other external organization, we had a group of coaches that we were working with, and we thought we were in real good shape that we could take this on our own. But as external companies can do sometimes, they rotated some of their key people out to other accounts and new people came in. They had a different idea of where we were, and we were like starting all over again. So that became a battle. And we actually had to bring in a third company to actually sort this out and create a definition of when we could say we're done. So those were key learnings from that first era that really was something that we had never tried before. So coming out of the Pathfinder era, the post condition, coming out of this, we did have pilot success. So there was no doubt about that. And we also got buy-in from the executives. We want to continue this. We do want to grow it, just not in the same way that we had started off doing this. So now we transition into what we call the transformation era. And now I was selected to be one of these, the first of these internal coaches that we were going to build this team from. So you can say this is kind of the emergence of Gandalf the Grey. I don't know if you can see that. So going into this, as the company a lot of companies tend to do, they go with their big 5 consulting companies, one of those, and bring those in. And what they did was they built a business case. They said, we can do this agile transformation. We can train internal coaches for you. And as a result of this, you're going to see cost savings based on the efficiencies and the improvements that the organization makes. And so that was and this was going to be 18, 24 months tops. So that was the prelude, I guess, to go into this new era. And this was in 2017, 2018. So what we did is we came up with a new theme, a space theme. Most of the major initiatives that we have done in the past revolved around industry related themes. But this was something, a space theme was something very different for us. And the way we approached this is we created 2 groups of like 5 internal coaches, and we would launch these, and using the space terminology, we would launch these rolling waves of teams, 12 to 20 teams at a time. And we would spend time with them with a boot camp, train them, work with them side by side as they got started, built their first backlog, started their sprints, and got them going. Over time, we recognized that this general Scrum training that we were doing for them was not really preparing people that were in these unique new roles, the product owner and the Scrum Master. So we went back and developed our own material specifically for those roles, skills and responsibilities that they needed to know and do in order to be more successful than just general Agile and Scrum training. And so we introduced that about midway through these rolling waves. Also found that a lot of these teams were very heavily service oriented. So it wasn't that they could plan all of the work that they were going to do for a sprint. A lot of their work was based on requests or incidents that came in ad hoc and unplanned at all times. So we recognized that Scrum was a difficult model for them to be able to follow. And the big 5 organizations said, we must start everybody with Scrum. And then if they say that the framework is the impediment, then we'll entertain other ideas. I actually befriended one of their more progressive consultants and talked about this. And I told him, I just completed the Kanban certification training on there. I said, I really want to try Kanban with this one team because I don't see Scrum fitting for them at all. And he said, just go do it. So I did. I went and set them up as Kanban and started developing a curriculum at which the other coaches quickly recognized would help them. And so we brought that into the training materials that we had as well. And that seemed to help those teams a lot better, a lot more. Another thing that the consulting company did was they said, we can do the same thing with DevOps. And they actually stood up a DevOps coaching team consisting of both external contractors that we brought in, engineers, and also members of the consulting company as well. And they kind of came behind us and tried to introduce DevOps to these newly minted Agile teams. So on the upside, we did introduce Agile across IT. And we had set a number of goals for how many teams we wanted to roll out by a certain time frame. And actually we incentivized that. People's bonuses were based on how many teams we rolled out. So obviously we were going to hit that goal. And from that, we were able to develop a bunch of reusable training material that we could use for new teams or for training new people that maybe came onto the teams later. And then that was something that was very helpful. And we kept refining it as we learned more about what was working and what wasn't. The new space theme was kind of exciting. Again, generated a little bit of buzz that we hadn't had for some other initiatives, just because it was something new, something we hadn't done before. On the downside, we only did this with IT. In fact, we were given explicit directions. Don't go to the business, just do IT. So your product owners essentially were proxies for what the business wanted, and hopefully knew enough about what they were looking for. And then because we were spending so much upfront time with the teams and we were trying to hit these goals, the message came, we need to go faster. We're not going fast enough. We don't have enough time to do this or money to do this. So basically we took a lift and shift approach, and we basically picked up teams where they were today, these siloed teams. And now we said, okay, now you're going to start doing things the Agile way, but it's still the same team, still the same dependencies, queues, things like that. And because of this hurry up, and we're just constantly training and rolling out teams, we started getting disconnects. We had disconnects in terms of time to learn, time to be able to connect with our teams that we had spent more time with up in the earlier days compared to the last ones where we had to jettison them quickly to go launch another set of teams. Also, just connecting with our own teammates, being able to share our experiences and what we learned with each other. There was no time for that. And the whole DevOps thing was just, there was no connection between what they were doing and what we were doing. And it was kind of a constant struggle there. Another thing that we were encouraged to do was to go back to the teams and assess them in terms of how effective they were and how, I don't want to say compliant, but how they were doing in terms of following Scrum processes. And that gave us a reputation of being the Scrum police. And so our reputation took a hit just because we were going so fast, spending less time, and now we're coming back and checking up on them like we're the police. So we took a hit on the reputation side because of that. So looking back on that, it calls into question, did we really need to make all of the service teams Agile? Did it make sense as opposed to just hitting a quota for how many teams we needed to roll out? We also learned that training alone doesn't last, but coaching will, if you get the time to do that coaching. And in order for us to be credible as coaches, we really needed to have experienced people that had been using Agile previously, rather than some of the coaches that were on the team didn't even know about Agile until they became a coach. And those, I think, were quickly discovered that they were not necessarily experienced in it and could go to them for answers to their questions based on experience. It was based on theory. So that also took a hit to our credibility as a coaching team. So coming out of the transformation era, we definitely mastered death by PowerPoint. We definitely had that down. And we launched nearly 100 teams using this approach here. So it's not like we didn't impact anybody. We impacted a lot of people, a lot of teams. But in terms of the business case, that was definitely a failure. We did not save money by doing this. In fact, we went through a lot of money trying to make this transformation happen and be successful. So now we transition over into a new era that we call the Enablement Era. And so now I moved from being the internal coach just being an internal coach to being the product owner of the coaching team, and actually moved up to what they call the Agile capability owner of the Agile coaches team. So now you can kind of say it was the emergence of Gandalf the White. And we had another change in IT leadership. The ones that were behind the selection of the Big Five consulting company left, there were still some people there that actually recognized that this was a problem. And so I helped convince them that we needed to make a change in terms of how we do this here. So we sent the Big Five consultants packing, and we brought in Evolve Agility and Darwin because we needed someone that was experienced in coaching the coaches. The Big Five consulting may or may not have had experience coaching Agile teams, but this coach the coach model was something that was foreign to them. They did not know how to do this. They just trained us how to be trainers. So we needed somebody who's experienced in coaching coaches to become better coaches, thus the change. And this was in 2019 and the early part of 2020. So I'm hoping that some of you have had the opportunity to hear Craig Larman talk about component teams and the impact on Agile for that. Component teams tend to lead to behaviors and patterns that really kind of create pseudo Agile teams. And we were guilty of that in the sense that we had created product teams, 3 different classifications of teams. We had product teams, platform teams, and service teams. Product teams supporting customers or other internal teams, platform teams to support the product teams, and then service teams to service everybody. But in reality, we were all doing services. So there really wasn't that clear demarcation of what the teams were, but there was brands that were assigned to them. And we needed to really make that shift from just trying to optimize the local teams and look at a bigger picture, a system picture of optimizing, and apply systems thinking approach to how we coach Agile teams. So bringing in Novel to help us really look at this in a whole different light was a huge mind shift for us. So a lot of things took place in this very short amount of time. We transitioned or pivoted from a push model where we're training and teams to a pull model. We wanted them to reach out to us and pull us in to help them work through their issues and their problems and become more effective. We also learned a different way, or how the difference between coaching a team versus coaching individuals. It's not the same approach for each. And using new tools that we hadn't had experience with before, like the coaching canvas, how to work with them to help them identify the problem and how they cope with it, and help them find their own solutions on solving these issues or these challenges that they had. This was a very different approach than just coming in as the expert and telling them what to do or answering their questions when they asked you, what do we do when this happens? In order to help repair the image that we had as well, we needed to rebrand ourselves. We had to show that we were different. And so we created this new brand we called the Agility Enablement Partners. And there were basically 3 legs to this. There was the learning part, or the training part that we had done before, was definitely a piece of it, although our approach is different. There was the coaching part, which had been missing for the most part in the last era, that we had just begun to start learning and doing. And we also brought into our team the technology side. So the group that supported the Jira platform that we were using, we all worked together as a single group, as a single team. And so this was something that was very unique in what we were doing. And we held showcases to educate not only the IT organization, but we actually started showing this to the business side as well, what we were doing, the successes we had, what we were doing. We had business and customer testimonials that played, a number of activities that went on in these showcases, try to help build that brand awareness of what we could offer. We also had coaches pairing with each other. Instead of going one-on-one with the teams, we had them pairing so that we could get 2 sets of eyes in there and ears to try to see what was going on, and then come back and talk about what could we do to help those teams to come back with them with. We also started a program of coaching team immersion, where we brought Scrum Masters in from teams and had them pair along with us so they could see what we were doing and help them learn coaching skills, because ultimately they could take that back to their team, because they should ultimately be the coach of their team as part of their Scrum Master responsibilities. To make sure we were getting consistent and quality education for these people, instead of coming up with the PowerPoints on our own, we actually brought in certified trainers to do Scrum Master, product owner, and also Kanban certification. We were giving our Scrum Masters and our product owners the education and the certification to help them advance their careers at the same time. So this was something that we had not done before. Some people had done it on their own, but this is something we brought to everybody, or all the teams, and offered it to them. We did create a series of training workshops, and not the PowerPoint way, but actually hands-on activity, using the Coblo drawing techniques while you're talking and presenting, teaching from the back of the room concepts, things that we had never done before, that we got very comfortable at and really enjoyed doing it. Open the invitation to anybody, business or IT. And it could be anything from just Agile fundamentals to specific things on that would help people in certain roles, even some technical ones, introduction to test-driven development, things like that, that we had not offered before. And we were encouraged to take our thought leadership outside of the company, go and present at conferences, at meetups and things like that, share what we have learned with others, and kind of create more of a brand for, or a recognition for what our company was doing, so that that might entice other people to come work for us. But probably my favorite part is we brought sexy back. We were back to experimenting again. We were trying new things that we hadn't done in a while. One of the things that we did for our team is we dedicated every Monday to what we called Collaboration Monday. And we all got together in a conference room. All the coaches got together in a conference room, and anybody could come in at any time if they had a question, kind of like an office. But we would talk about what are the things that we could do. Let's think of some new things that we could do and that we could try. And what are the challenges that we're seeing out there with the teams that we're coaching today? Bring in the immersion candidates and let them start to see what we're doing and the thought process behind that. We also introduced or brought out a tool called Office Vibe, which is a surveying tool that you can send out just a quick 3 to 5 questions that ask people some kind of general questions, but from that data that you gather gives you feedback, not only us, but also the managers of those teams. So you can see where are the problems. Are they unhappy? Are they unhealthy? You know, what are the things that they're struggling with? And this could help give you feedback that you could act on right away, rather than waiting till the annual company survey comes out and then they parse through that data and then they decide to do something later. This was real-time feedback that we weren't able to do before. So this was something very new as well. And again, on the positive side, we were getting recognition. We were getting appreciation now for this new approach, the things we were doing, the things we were talking about, making people aware of. We were starting to rebuild those bridges between IT and business now, making it more connections than we had in the past. Actually taking Agile to some of them as they reached out to us on the business side. How can we do this? We want to learn about this. We want to do it. So they were pulling us in. We also became more effective at coaching, the way we were coaching, really trying to help the teams solve their own problems, rather than us being the answer people. And this was something that some people struggled with. And of course, the Collaboration Mondays was definitely helpful for us in terms of planning what our strategy was going to be, what we were going to do next. On the downside, this is not a model that's quickly scalable. And by this time we were running out of the remaining funds that we had for the whole Agile initiative. So this was coming to an end. We found that as people were reaching out to us, the solution seekers, they don't want to be accountable for coming up with their own answers. They want the quick answer that they can go implement. And so some of them really struggled with that approach, but we continue to work with those that were willing to and trying to help them find their own. And when you're rolling out a new model, a different direction, a pull model, it takes a lot of marketing. And we didn't realize how much marketing it was going to take to really get this thing off the ground. The showcases were a help, and other things that we did were a help, but it really does take continuous marketing to get this going, and something that we hadn't really had much experience with. So in the end, what you know versus what you think you know. We started off, we thought we really knew what we were doing there, and then we hit that wall of reality and realized, oh, we really don't know as much as we think we do. And so we kind of had to go back to the drawing board here in this era and really rethink the approach that we were taking and how we were doing this. Definitely learned that coaching is more powerful than training. And actually, we really did this. We actually, in our showcases, we took that Peanuts theme psychology, Lucy's psychiatric help booth. We actually set up a booth there, and people could drop in and ask a question, stump the coach, an invitation to a conversation. We actually did this here, just as a fun way to kind of show them and talk to them about what we can do and what questions they might have, how we might be able to help them and maybe start an engagement with them. And really the path that we took probably was the only way we could have arrived at where we are. It's just a shame we didn't get there sooner, but it is what it is. But it was 2020 and another unexpected ecosystem occurred that we did not see coming. I don't think anybody saw what was going to happen with the pandemic arriving. What happened here was, instead of IT, now we had we had new leadership at the top of the company, a new CEO and new leaders there. And we had to react quickly. I mean, it was not just our survival, it was our customers' survival. And so they quickly stood up cross-functional teams. The executive leadership took business agility to a whole nother level here. They had to develop solutions quickly to solve these major problems, both for ourselves, for our customers, and really for the whole industry supply chain that broke down when all this started. And the impetus for change, we hope this is an impetus for change for the organization for every day, not just when there's a crisis. So we hope this is the beginning of something that's going to last. Will it? I mean, time will tell. We'll have to see. So So the changes in the ecosystem result in changes in species and teams and organizations. Darwin didn't realize how fast this could happen. Neither did we until now. And that's the end of my presentation here. And I will open it up to questions.
By the way, thank you, Ron. That was your music, right? From the background coming through?
That was Billy Joel.
I figured, yeah, thank you. Okay, so folks, the floor is open. I have been monitoring, excuse me, the chat, and I don't see any, well, there's one explicit question, I think, from Adam. If you wanna, there was one privately sent to me. We'll leave it until later. Adam, do you wanna rehash your question openly? If you're
sure, I don't mind.
Yeah, Sure. Or I can just,
Yeah, no, it was, you said, he had said death by PowerPoint, and I had an assumption of what that meant. And I just wanted to hear it in your own words. Because having gone to graduate business school, separate from Agile, I already died once from PowerPoint. So when I see it in transformations, I feel like I'm dying all over again.
Yeah, so this is a common training approach, is that somebody spends hours and hours and hours creating these beautiful, animated power, and I'm a little bit guilty of that myself here, so I try to get through it quickly. But yeah, creating these PowerPoint slides, and then people sit there for an hour, several hours, just going through these, trying to stay awake, trying to stay focused, thinking about what their next meeting is. And you're losing them. This is not sinking in. This is not really effective. It's good material, perhaps, and useful, but it's just not really an effective way for people to grasp something and hold on to it very long.
I think that leads me into a second question, if you'll allow me, Ron, which was around the marketing, right? That's like a typical change management thing. Like everyone thinks I said it to them once, and you actually have to say it to them minimum 8 times before they hear it once.
Absolutely.
What kind of things did you end up, or are you still experimenting with to try to help with that marketing?
So part of what happened with the pandemic too, I missed that as I was trying to be mindful of the time. When the pandemic hit, everything came to a halt basically. And, we were no longer going in the office. So obviously you're not going to have the FaceTime with teams. We did do some remote. We actually converted some of our workshops and stuff into remote sessions, but ultimately the decision was made that we were not going to continue with an internal coaching team. We had too many other urgent priorities we needed to work on as a result. So those coaches that remained with the company got reallocated, like myself, as Scrum Master, to key teams to work on those initiatives. So the marketing essentially ended because the effort ended. But the marketing that we were doing while we were in this era was to, like I said, we were doing showcases. We were putting signs up. We would do little teasers. We would maybe put an easel up somewhere and have a question up there and have dots there, and people could dot vote, just to kind of get them thinking about different things we had before. Doing lunch and learns. We have email newsletters that go out from IT and the company, and getting a little blurb in there. Just a lot of different things we tried to get that recognition. And as we got invited into some of the larger initiatives on the business side, because they wanted to look at Agile as well, we tried to leverage what they had experienced to help share what they had done with others as well. So tried to leverage our customers to help spread the word as well, and leadership as well. Good question.
Hey, Ron, got a question for you. Was there ever a throw up your hands moment that transitioned to the next errors that you had? And was there a single moment where it's like, well, we need to change, and thus the beginnings of the next transition and the error? Was there just a single event, or was it maybe we decided to just do it anyways, or what did that look like?
Well, in that first era where we started off with the group of external coaches pairing with our teams in that Pathfinder era, it was that struggle of arguing with our partners here. When are we done? We think we're done. You told us we were done. Now you're saying we're not done. And it's like, no, if we've got to go with somebody else and have you define when you're done, this is not going to work. We need to do something totally different. So that was a pivot there. The pivot to a big 5 consulting company was kind of a surprise for me, but it's not a surprise in the sense that we typically do that whenever we have a large initiative. And then the fact that we were going through so much money, we weren't seeing the business case benefits that they promised. That was kind of the next aha moment to move out of that. And the fact that our reputation was in the toilet too, we needed to do a pivot there to try to recover that, because we knew there were still opportunities. we needed to take a whole different approach. And that's why I talked to my boss and the IT leadership about, hey, I know a guy that can really turn this thing around here. And so I introduced them to Davo, and we went down a new path.
Awesome. Thank you.
Ron, I got one question pinged to me privately. So just so you know, there's at least one question in the queue. So back to the folks, ask more. I'll leave mine for later, or whatever was sent to me. If no one is asking, I will step in so we don't waste time. So just someone asked not to,
Gene, I think there are a couple people that asked questions in the chat. I don't know if we've answered all those.
I see there are quite a few comments. I don't see anything with a question mark. I'm going up and down.
There was one by Karen about what were some of the best examples of the showcases and what might have made them
you're right.
successful.
The very last one. Yep. What was the best? Yep. What were the best examples of the most successful showcases, and what was it that made them successful?
So we had basically two campuses. We did one that was just us alone. How do I want to say it? It was just our Agility Enablement Partners group. It wasn't with other Agile teams. It was just us. And we took over a couple conference rooms, and we set up stations all around there. And we demonstrated like some of the things that we had done. The technology team showed what you could do with Jira, some of the things that maybe people didn't know about. We had, you saw that advice booth that we set up there. We had some games set up too, to kind of introduce some of the concepts. And I can't think of one right off the top of my head. Maybe Davo, maybe you can recall some of the games or activities that we had set up in there to kind of illustrate some of the Agile points. We also had projectors running with videos playing and testimonials, where we were both from the IT leadership and business, and also from our customers, teams that we had worked with, and the success that we brought to them. So those were playing continuous loops in the background. We did some surveys as well too. We had them to put in we had like a slider chart and kind of indicate with dot voting, where do you feel your team is maturity wise in different areas within Agile. We had
there were a lot of exercises that the internal coaches developed based on learning the problems that the team members were having. So we would take those training exercises and set up as a booth activity, not a full, like here you're going to learn something, but we took out the fun element and put it on the showcase booth as an attractor for people to say, oh, this was fun. Where can I get more of this fun activity? And like, oh, come to our training. We are discussing how you connect with business on what your roadmap is. Because the main pivot we made was we stopped talking in terms of here's Agile. We said, here are the problems we see, and this training bite, like a short training event, will help solve your problem. So that was sort of like our approach, is to lead with the problem first and not with the solution.
Well, thank you both. Good examples, very creative.
And we also were trying to promote the training workshops that we had set up too on a regular schedule. And we put posters up with QR codes on there so that people could go and quickly get to the sign up site to join those and learn about those.
So how long were these showcases? Was it a full day?
They ran about maybe 3 hours, I think. We didn't think we could get people. I mean, people could drop in and out as they wanted to. It wasn't, come and stay for the whole thing. People could come in, visit whatever they wanted to, stay as long as they wanted to. I think we did maybe 3 hours to a half day at a time.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Ron, thank you, Karen. Ron, there's at least one more question in the queue, and also I have one holding. It's private, so I want to make sure I sneak it in because it's relevant to the for the first comment you made, replying to Adam's question. So someone is essentially asking, well, no names being used, nor is the name of the company being used, specifically on the decision of moving away from the big five consultancies services. Any additional nuggets, any additional information as to why this was done? Presumably there's someone has an experience, similar experience with their own very large client company, relying on pretty much this is how you do it because it's in the deck approach coming from a large consultancy, XYZ consultancy. So anything you would like to share on that front?
Well, again, I think the reason for selecting that group was because it was a company that we had used previously on a number of other large initiatives as well. So I think there was probably a level of comfort in that they had relied on them for other things. So this was just another thing for them to do. And they had presented themselves as being experienced in this area, but their experience, assuming they really had it, and I think they may have hired some people in for this engagement that they didn't previously have, but the experience they had was more about being the coach of the teams rather than training us how to be coaches. I think they had to do a lot of research on there to try to come up with material to be able to do this, because this was something very new for them. Those that were honest with me would tell me that, we've never done this before. We've done the working with teams, but we've never taught people how to be coaches. So I think it's just kind of a unfortunate situation. And it was just a certain level of comfort that they had relied on this company for other things before. So they just, I guess, felt comfortable with bringing them in for this approach as well. But I think the results probably were very typical for that kind of an approach, by bringing in a large consultant company that may or may not have the experience with what you're specifically trying to accomplish, but maybe with some aspects of it they did.
Right. Thank you. Hopefully that answer satisfies whoever asked it. And yeah, the large consultancy factor is well known. You can put a body mass behind your PowerPoint deck and hopefully it will open the door. There's a question from Sub. How big is the transformation? Is it the same? Is it same people were involved? Were involved in all areas, or it was scaling in each area? So we got 3 minutes, by the way. So feel free to do it shortly.
So, I mean, the first era, the coaching was all external. In the second era, we created a team of internal coaches. And in the final era, we had about half of those left. Some of those left the company or went to other positions. They recognized that coaching was not their thing. So in that final era, we worked with the coaches that remained with the team, the ones that were really committed to being coaches and getting better at that. So there was definitely a connection between those two. Whereas the coaches were primarily external. And some of the people that were on those early Agile teams did become coaches. So
Gene, if I may, along with Ron's input, and there's a big write-up on a case study, so maybe we can put it on your website so people can kind of take a look at the PDF of what happened.
And by the way, we got 2 more questions in the queue. I'm not sure if we can get to them. Take a look, Ron, real quick. If you can pick one of the other. One is from JJ, another one is from Thoralf, and there's one from Vic coming through, I think. So, Double to your point, yes. Could you send me the link ASAP? So once I get the assets from Ron, I'll make them available.
Will do.
Okay. Oh yeah, I didn't have the chat open. I have it open now. Yeah. So who is in the executive cross?
Yeah, take it from the bottom. Yeah.
Oh, from the bottom.
Well,
Oh, yeah.
There are a few.
Who is in those executive cross-functional teams supporting teams in your particular? So I'm assuming they're talking about what happened with the pandemic on this one, because they're saying executive cross-functional teams. So they basically, they selected people from the business and from IT.
12 o'clock.
So they had somebody that was basically that could deliver the solutions to the problems that they were facing. So it wasn't necessarily people that were from Agile teams, but it was people that by bringing those cross functions together on the same team, they could work it out and solve it themselves without having to do too much reaching out to other people and other teams as well. So that's really kind of the key thing is these were integrated teams with business and IT. It wasn't just an IT thing that business gave us. And what time of coaches did you come? What?
Sorry, it's what type of coaches?
Oh, type of
Ron?
coaches. Okay.
Yeah, sorry. I put the type out there.
So
So,
are you talking about internal or are you talking about external?
no, I understood that you brought in some external coaches and so I was curious, were they leadership coaches that came from a true coaching background, or were there coaches that were using lean and agile practices from the past and they were using that experience?
Well, in the first group or in the first era there, they were both practitioners and trainers. So they had the experience not only of doing the work, but also of coaching other people to do that same work. The second one was probably more, they were used to just being the coaches and training people how to do Agile without training the coaches on how to be coaches. I forgot where I was going with that now. But probably in the second group there, the biggest chunk of that was just basically Scrum. Their expertise was in Scrum. Some knew Kanban, but they were trying to keep us away from that. They were trying to push us into Scrum, and we were trying to tell them that there are teams that is just not going to work for. And it wasn't until we pushed back that we finally started doing that and helping those teams, the service-oriented teams that really needed a more flexible way of operating than just pre-planning for sprints and then blocking everything for 2 weeks.
Thank you, Ron. Thanks.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you, Ron. Ron, we got just a few minutes over. I know some people think they need to be dropping. So just to be fair to everyone else, let's take maybe if you want to take another question. There was one from
Sure.
The one we skipped. Let's see, with a question mark. Thoralf, if you just roll up a few inches in the chat. I'll say it. Who was in those executive cross-functional teams supporting the teams in your particular context?
Yeah, that's what I was saying. It was a
Oh,
blend.
you did? Okay.
Yeah, business and IT. It was, people they felt that could really provide that service to deliver it together.
Got it. All right. I think would be right. So Martin, any tricks to boost? Why don't you take one more if you would like, and then we'll wrap it. Let's take any tricks to boost the transition to feature teams, component teams, and the coordination of their dependencies seems so complex that organizations hesitate to experiment restructuring. Yeah, it's a so less-ish question, right? We talk about so much in large-scale Scrum about moving away from component teams with local optimization all around to feature-centric feature.
Yeah.
So take that one if you could.
Yeah. So, I mean, when we were first starting out with the Pathfinders, we were building brand new teams from scratch and trying to, thoughtfully assemble a cross-functional team that could deliver on a specific purpose. As we got into that second era there, and they were becoming less patient with how long it takes for you to put a team like that together and to get them operational and functional. The push was to deliver the teams faster. And so we didn't get the opportunity to really thoughtfully create cross-functional teams. We just did that whole lift and shift and just brought teams into Agile without really thinking that we were making any effective change at all. So we were, I think, kind of fooling ourselves and thinking we were going to make them Agile when we hadn't changed anything other than the role titles and the and how they did their work.
We call it rearranging deck seats on Titanic and relabeling, right?
Exactly.
You know, changing nothing while changing nothing.
Changing hats, and that's it.
Yeah, changing hands. Okay. Well, on this note, I would like to kind of wrap this up gradually. First of all, Ron, your information will be available shortly thereafter. Once we wrap it, I'll zap it, I'll zip it, I'll upload the video with the assets you send, and I'll send also the link to the use case, to the case study. Can people reach out to you directly if they have any questions?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I think I've got on the last slide there, I've got my LinkedIn connection there.
Yep, I'll grab it as well. I'll make it very transparent on LinkedIn. So your LinkedIn profile, so people can reach out to you directly, as well as Double, by the way. So other than that, I really wish, this was a little longer, but we usually budget for 1 hour just to be disciplined and fair to everyone. So thank you all for joining, folks. Once again, enjoy the rest of the weekend, and have your colleagues and friends and network join the meetup. We'll be hosting more events as we go. During summertime, we'll try to stick to weekends, but maybe we'll push it by 1 hour early so you can get some time to yourselves during the day. So we'll figure this out. Thank you all for joining.
Yes, thank you, Gene.
Questions and your participation.
Thank you, Ron.
Yes.
Thank you,
Thanks
Gene.
for joining.
Ron, thank you very much again, and Double to you as well. Thank you, LG.
All right, and I'll send you a PDF of this here.
Yep,
So,
I'm gonna be on the lookout for that.
all right.
Cool. Cheers.
Thanks.
Bye.